guys and girls. So I've built myself a gas forge. Now I'm not a fan of gas forges, everyone knows that. I prefer my solid fuel forge. You can see this one actually mounts on top of my solid fuel forge because I'm only ever going to be using one or the other. The only reason I have it at all is because where I live gets fairly strict fire bans during the summer months because bushfires are a real big problem in Australia. So when the fire bans are on, using a solid fuel forge is totally off the menu. Another reason that I like to use it is that where I live in Australia specifically gets incredibly strong winds, sometimes strong enough to flip shipping containers and uproot trees. So using a charcoal forge in wind like that, especially in an open front forge like I've got, is nightmarish. So gas forge doesn't give a damn if it's windy or not. For those two options, the work doesn't stop, neither do I, so gas forge had to be on the menu. Now, I went with a fairly classic design, which is made out of a 8.5 litre gas bottle, or sometimes a 9 litre gas bottle, depending on where you're from. And it ironically connects up to another 9 litre gas bottle to get its fuel. Now, I have used a single Venturi burner style system. It's not forced air or anything like that. I only need a very basic forge. And it got me thinking, because a basic forge is usually, when somebody's building their first gas forge, a lot of beginners do this, is usually where you start, fairly basic, because you can get some very advanced gas forges, things with multiple burners that you all have to tune correctly, forced air burners, ribbon burners. You can get very fancy with it. To try and chase that perfect efficiency, you'll have to excuse my face at the moment. The spring is here and hay fever is hitting me like a ton of bricks. But this is what I ended up going with, made largely out of scrap materials. I was originally going to do a video on how I built it and the steps that I went through. However, a quick search for gas bottle forge on YouTube will reveal thousands of videos on how to build them, and they're all fairly thorough and good to follow. So I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. What I wanted to talk about was some concepts that you may not have considered when building or designing your first forge. If you are building a gas bottle forge as a beginner for the first time, or if you just want a simple forge like this, but you want to get the maximum, not necessarily maximum efficiency, because that is an art form of which I am not an expert in, but something that is efficient enough that you can forge weld in it if you need to. If you need to make up a Damascus billet, you can do it. And something that won't actually bleed heat out and use up all of your gas really quickly. Like a 9 litre bottle on this will have this thing running all day. Like I'm talking 8 to 10 hours for 3 or 4 days. That's pretty good for my needs at least. 9 litre gas bottles aren't huge. If I was to hook this up to a proper sized gas bottle, I'd get weeks worth of work out of it. But if I'm using this for weeks, then I've got problems because I don't like using gas forges at all. Main reason for that is that gas forges are all or nothing heat. You can't really control the heating over various aspects of your work like you can a solid fuel forge. Also, they're really noisy. Really, really noisy. You need to wear hearing protection if you're going to be locked in a room with one of these things. Also, just a personal preference. I kind of like the poetry of the old-fashioned solid fuel forge with the hand crank blower. But some design points. This build, I wanted it to be quick, simple and easy, and I was able to actually do that. If you guys are listening to the ForgeCast, which I don't know why you wouldn't be, you should be, you will know that up to recently GameCo have been our sponsor for the show, and a long time ago I actually bought this GameCo burner. I wanted to have it on hand for if I did need to build a gas forge, so I've actually had this for 2 years sitting around. It's a very simple, efficient Venturi system, made in Australia. Good quality product, really. Very easy to operate. You've got a little valve here that you can open and close just by rotating it in order to control the amount of oxygen that gets sucked into the Venturi system, because they work kind of like a carburetor. You've just basically got a nice solid on-off ball valve. Shoots your LPG straight down this into a flare at the bottom, which just weld into place on your forge. However, what I didn't have was a refractory setup for it. Now, refractory is a long topic, and getting thermal efficiency in your forge is a long topic that I'll leave for greater minds than mine. Sam Towns. What I opted to do was go with a system that I didn't really have to think about, and GameCo also offered refractory kits. So I picked up one of those, and it comes with isowall. It's like a KO wall sort of thing. The fiberglass or ceramic mesh. Looks like pillow stuffing, really. But if you can imagine highly carcinogenic pillow stuffing, and you put that blanket, you wrap it around. It comes with nice little round cut ends, and it's designed to fit into a 9-litre gas bottle. So you don't actually have to cut the KO wall at all. It's all just perfectly sized for a gas bottle, which is good for me, because cutting up KO wall is, you need respirators and eye protection and things. You don't want to be breathing that stuff in. Came with the rigidizer for it, and it came with some refractory. Now, it's a bit of a highly contentious topic. I was shocked at how little refractory actually came with the kit, and that bothered me quite a bit. However, the medical record shows that rigidizer applied correctly to isowall or KO wall is enough to seal it and stop any of the fibers from coming out, becoming airborne, and making you drown in your own lung fluids, which is, always a fun weekend. Me being paranoid, I personally was not comfortable with just using rigidizer. Now, I'm not a doctor, so take what I say with a grain of salt, because, like I said, the actual medical record shows the rigidizer is enough. However, there's no visual way, this is my reasoning only, there's no visual way to tell when rigidizer has stopped being efficient, like it's burnt away. Rigidizer is not permanent. You need to renew it, and there's no visual way to just look in your forge and go, oh, that rigidizer needs redoing. You could just have a schedule, like do it every 3 months or something. However, refractory, completely sealing KO wall is a really great indicator, because one, it's a rigid, hard shell that covers it, and you can see when it's deteriorating and just reapply it. You could even just smear it in the cracks if it's, it's, as long as it's creating that shell, then it's keeping that KO wall nice and safe and stops it being exposed. Now, there are some videos out there where people make forges and just put KO wall and don't rigidize it, don't seal it, don't do anything. Don't do that. The fibers that can be released after setting the KO wall on fire become airborne, you breathe them in, and it just destroys your lungs and will kill you. It's really dangerous. Like, blacksmithing is dangerous anyway. Blacksmithing with an unsealed KO wall line forge is really dangerous. You can't even be just cutting this stuff up cold without wearing respirators. It's dangerous, highly carcinogenic stuff. So you want to rigidize it, you want to seal it fully. Now, the GameCo kit does not come with enough Duracast to actually coat the entire lining. It comes with enough to do a floor. Now, when I was designing this, and I highly recommend you do this as well, when I was designing this, I wanted there to be a removable floor, something interchangeable, because forge floors deteriorate over time. They've got the full force blast of the burner hitting them the entire time you're using them. They're having steel dragged across them all the time. It's going to deteriorate. So to design it so that once it's balked, you can just reach in there while it's cold and pull out the broken floor bits and put a new one in is a very valuable feature to have in a forge. So I found that the kit came with just enough Duracast to cover the floor with a recess for me to put fire brick in at the bottom. Now, as an aside, a little pro tip here. One of the things that will kill your forge floor the fastest is borax. Borax, when it's molten, is just it just eats away at fire brick. It just destroys the entire floor of your forge, which is why it's good to make them removable and interchangeable. Now, I've heard one good way around this phenomenon. I have not tried this yet, but I've been reading about it, and it seems like it's a goer, and I'm going to actually try it, is to get bentonite clay. If you know you're going to be doing forge welding using flux, get bentonite clay and put a layer of it down, like a nice tamped layer of it, across the entire bottom of your forge floor. Tamp it nicely, because the force of the jet on a Venturi burner will just blow out a cloud of bentonite clay if it's loose. But if you put that down on your floor, it will actually absorb a lot of the molten flux, saving your floor. And You can just sort of scoop it out if you're not using it, or you can just leave it in there until it eventually wears away. It's a good way to prolong the lifespan of the fire bricks that you have on the floor. Anyway, to jump back, after I did that, I had exposed yet rigidized KO wall on the walls and the ceiling, because it is a circular profile with a flat bottom. And so I got extra refractory and lined the entire roof, walls, and the back to create that dome. And it is important to do a arch pattern and not square, because any architect will tell you that an archway is one of the most structurally sound structures you can have, because of the complementary forces. As the thing deteriorates and wants to fall apart, it's all going to be sort of interlocked together, and gravity is going to hold it up longer and mean that you don't have to replace it as often as something like a squared ceiling and squared walls. So another reason why you want to have a curved inside is you'll notice that my burner actually goes in at an angle which is about 30 degrees. I eyeballed it, so it's not exactly 30 degrees, but basically you want it to be around the 30 degree mark. And you want it to be sort of offset so it goes in one side, curls around, creates a vortex motion. You don't need to do this. You'll notice a lot of forges just have it straight down. Straight down is fine. It'll work fine. It's just if you've got a vortex, you've got more circulation of the heat and you'll get a more even heat across the piece. Whereas if you've got it straight down, you'll tend to get hot spotting where the burner is hitting the work. If you do it like this, mine's a little bit offset this way a little bit more than I would have liked, but you know, it's welded in now. Once you've drilled the hole, you've drilled the hole. If it was a little bit more offset, it would go around the piece and have less direct jet against it. Now, the inside of my forge is big enough that I can actually I can work around that. Like I said, this is a temporary measure for me. I've got a gas forge purely just to be able to get me through the windy days and the fire ban days, and that's all. Now, a note on thermal efficiency, you'll notice that I've welded this shelf on the front and I've got these little sliding fire brick doors. Now, when you're firing the forge up for the first time, you want to kind of keep it closed, keep the doors closed, and it keeps the heat sealed in there, seals in the juices. A lot of people like to have a back door on their forge. That's a good idea if you're working on particularly long pieces. I mean, the depth of my forge is probably only about 8 inches. Like I said, it's a tight over forge, but if I was working on a Bowie knife or something like that, it makes this really hard to use for that. So this is why, another reason why you might see people with triple burner forges, with a door at the back that can be open and closed, because it's called a pass-through forge, the technical term is for it. Like the forges, the gas bottle forges that are upright, that Niels Vanderberg sells at Black Dragon Forge, are pass-through forges. They've got a door at the front, door at the back, and you can pass the work through it. Really good for heat treating and forging long pieces like Bowie knives, choppers, that sort of thing. So I'm not doing that, so I've just got the door at the front, and I've got the good old replaceable sliding mechanism. A little better. It's all mild steel here, but it stops these falling off unless I open too far this way. But you can always just buy new fire brick and knock it together. But really, that's about everything to do with my forge. I personally would recommend sealing your KO wall with more than just rigidizer. I know I'm going against actual doctors who have training in this, but I'm just, you know, it's when you're dealing with your lungs, you've only got one set. Why would you mess around? You know, just do a little bit extra safety. One other thing I'd like to clarify, my last video about ant sand refractory, I had a few people in the comments that were confused. Nowhere in that video do I say that it's appropriate for gas forges. It's for fire pots, things that aren't affected by gravity. Like the inside of this gas forge, the walls on the side and the roof are under the influence of gravity. The floor is not. It's sitting there, it's supported underneath completely, whereas the roof has to act on its own support. Ant sand under LPG, burning LPG temperatures and being exposed to the sort of heat that a gas forge will get to, will crack and deteriorate faster if it's under the effects of gravity. It's not good at that. So I wouldn't recommend ant sand or termite mound as a refractory for a gas forge. It's not, like, it'll work, it'll do it, but after a few uses, you'll start seeing some pretty rapid deterioration. You really want to use something like Duracast or Satanite, or even if you mix it really well and let it set properly and cure it properly, the super secret mix that I've talked about on the ForgeCast in the past. The trick with that is to mix it very well, because the different viscosities, or like perlite and vermiculite, want to float, and cement wants to sink. So you really need to keep it very well mixed, and mix it in a thicker state so that you don't get that separation. Because if you get that separation, your perlite is going to crystallize, melt together, fuse, and you get some weirdness happening. For the record, my fire brick for the floor, my removable fire brick, is made out of that super secret recipe. It's holding up very, very well. So, haven't been doing any forge welding in there yet though, so we'll see how it works with the addition of borax into the mix. That's why I mentioned the bentonite clay, which you can actually usually buy cheaply as clumping cat litter. But it's just clay, natural clay, bentonite clay. You don't want to put it in as the grainy structure that you would get in the form of cat litter. You want to put it through a food processor or something first and get it to the flour consistency. What I'll do is I will fire this puppy up and show you it running, essentially. Get some nice glamour shots of that, and aside from that, pretty much call it a day. Don't forget to check me out on Facebook and Instagram, and also check out my Redbubble, where I've got some really cool new stickers and t-shirts and all sorts of things that are all blacksmithing related and knife making related. And check out my Etsy store, because Christmas is coming up, or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or whatever you celebrate. It's coming up, so gift ideas are always a good thing. Anyway, I hope you found this informative. I hope it inspires you to go and get a refractory kit like the one that I got from GameCo, nice Venturi burner, and make yourself a gas bottle forge, because even if you prefer solid fuel forges, they are really handy to have. They are a lot of fun. Regardless of what your preference is, they're still a lot of fun. And who doesn't like setting things on fire? Anyway, I'm going to get going and maybe blow my nose and take some Claritin or something. We'll catch you guys later. Bye.
When it rains, we get trapped for days on the peninsula. The hazards of our primrose path, south of a swollen river. The power cut, all the lights went out, and I walk you home and back again. All you a midnight